First, rise for a moment of silence. All right, we will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Barton.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you all for coming today. We have a nice crowd today. A lot of stuff we got to go over on the agenda, so if we could be mindful in the public comments, keep your, if you could, before we go to that, individuals, you have 3 minutes to speak. Please keep your comments to that. If you're speaking for a group, please specify the group. And when you approach, please state your name and address for the record. So I currently have some folks who've signed up. Mike Walters. Mr. Reed is our timekeeper.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Walters. I live at 119 Old Ridge Road, Livingston, in the Central District. I'm here today to again bring up the degrading and hazardous conditions of the state maintained portion of Old Ridge Road, Wood Mill Lane, and Bridge 12617 connecting these roads to Route 29. For context, these roads are on no outlet. Woodridge Farm Brewery sits at the end top of the state maintained portion of the road, just giving you perspective on traffic. And there are approximately 28 homes that use these roads as their only access. The road is extremely deteriorated. The road doesn't support two-way traffic comfortably. Oversized vehicles routinely block access on the 180-degree turn from Wood Mill Lane to Old Ridge Road. My concern is that whether there's a medical emergency or fire and 2 45-foot tour buses are stuck on the road for hours. It's happened. I get plenty of examples of these roads being blocked by stuck vehicles. The 180-degree turn is treacherous with cars coming head on. The National Bridge Registry states that the bridge connecting these roads to Route 29 was constructed in 1966, but that doesn't make sense because photographs from Camille don't show this bridge. The bridge barely supports two-way traffic. People when traveling 29 north have to come to almost a complete stop in the right lane to successfully maneuver the turn. And then somebody, I guess VDOT, assesses average daily traffic at 164 as of 2014, pre-bar. These issues are compounded by the unaware drivers that routinely mistake Shady's Place entrance for Route 6. I've spoken here before about these issues. I've contacted VDOT on numerous occasions about these issues to no avail. My tax dollars at work. My hopes are to stop wasting money on Band-Aids. It solves nothing. Please conduct a road survey and please consider resurfacing the road. But if I had my way, I would re-engineer the road. And finally, I pay my taxes every year with the hope that the government would actually support the people and businesses that comprise the tax base.
Thank you, sir. Eric Bowen. Eric, I think you signed up with Aaron too, so.
Yes, sir.
2 for 1. Make it 5.
Eric Bowen, Animal Science Extension Agent for Amherst, Nelson Counties, out of the Nelson County Virginia Cooperative Extension Office. Chairman Rutherford, members of the board, Administrator McGarry. I had the pleasure of being in front of you all several times to provide you all updates. Got one last update for you all. Back in January, working with the district director, since we've got the office fully staffed, we decided to turn the unit coordinator role over for myself, which I was being split between 2 offices, to one of the staff members inside the office over there for the daily operations. So I have been providing some of the reports, but Aaron Harris, the 4-H agent, is now the new unit coordinator and will be working with you all in the county over the government relations, and she has the final year-end report with her. Thank you.
My name is Erin Harris. I am a resident of Nelson County, and I'm very excited to continue in my role as 4-H agent for Virginia Cooperative Extension in Nelson County and to continue that role and to be a unit coordinator for the office as well. Thank you.
Thank you guys so much. Look forward to working with you some more. And congratulations. Moving on to Reverend Rose.
Good afternoon, members of the board. Madam County Administrator. My name is Reverend James Rose. I live at 2225 Union Hill Drive. I went down, come on behalf of the Gladstone Senior Center this afternoon. Some of them were supposed to be here, the president and some of them, but I don't see anyone here. So I'm going to speak on behalf of the Gladstone Senior Center. As you know, years ago, we let by the depot that closed down. So we moved to the Gladstone Fire and Rescue. We had to reorganize. We had 8 people. Now we have over 35. And first of all, I want to thank you for supporting us on the bills and with the hood that you helped us a few years ago. But I'll come this afternoon to say to you that Gladstone has been denied junk. They used to get 4 trips a year. So that was cut out. And they don't get any. And they used to get them. And they asked me to speak to try to get those trips back. I know it's budget time. I know you fund junk. But we're asking that you give them those 4 trips back a year that they were getting before. And it's not fair. If Loveson is getting it, Rockfish is getting those trips, and Gladstone has been denied. So we want you to reinstate the trips for Gladstone for a year. And that's not asking too much. It's not asking too much. They deserve it. We're working hard up there. We increased our membership, as I said. So they pay taxes. They told me to let you know that they pay taxes and they deserve the same treatment as the other senior citizens are getting. Again, thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Rose. Will Fury?
Good afternoon. My name is Will Flory. I'm one of your assistant Commonwealth attorneys. I'm sure you all now, maybe you're even tired of seeing me. I'm back again about drug court. I just want to thank you in advance. I understand the drug court MOU is on the consent agenda for today. That is sort of the touchstone piece for us to begin operation of drug court, because that's what's going to allow us to hire our coordinator. So I just wanted to thank you in advance for your approval and your continued support of the drug court.
Oh, Purvis? Is there anybody else who wishes to speak today? All right, hearing none. We now close the public comment section portion of our agenda. Moving on to the consent agenda, do we have a motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Parr. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second from Mr. Reed. Any discussion? We go by acclamation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any objections? Hearing none, approved as presented. We have a lot of presentations today, so let's try to be a little bit mindful for everyone. VDOT report.
Thank you, Chairman. Really don't have a whole lot to report on. We are, as far as our maintenance activities, we have been doing some pipe replacements throughout the county. We did a pipe replacement, of 2 pipe replacements over on Visalia, Route 680. We replaced the pipe down on
Riverside
Road due to a flooding issue. And currently, Old Roseland Road is closed for a pipe replacement. Route 723, it's a detour up. Anticipate that being closed at least 2 weeks. It's a rather large structure, and but that is ongoing now. Other than that, I do not have a whole lot of other maintenance, report about maintenance. We are working on real rustic projects, getting ready to hard surface on unpaved roads, and I think most of you all know what they are. Last month I mentioned the rural rustic unpaved road priority list. Just looking ahead to when we update the 6-year plan, right now there are 5 routes on this road that we prioritized last year, that the board prioritized last year. And those routes will be sufficient to add another year, when we add another year to the 6-year plan to take care of our allocation. In fact, we probably won't get through these 5, but, again, if you have any roads, unpaved roads you want me to put on this list to be considered by the board when we revise the plan and hold public hearing, please send them to me. And we will look at them and we'll get them on the list and see what we have. And then you all, you can, we'll go through our priority. But this year, as far as the existing priority list, we have more than enough on the current list that's prioritized to add projects to the 6-year plan. So we're in good shape with that. So that just want to throw that out there at you. Also, I see we have a Stanton District, Augusta County, they want to do a truck restriction on Route 814 Love Road over in Augusta County. Of course, it comes over into Nelson County. And they sent that to us, asking us for some concurrence from this board or a letter of support, which is usually what it is. It's not asking for a resolution. But we have reviewed this from a traffic engineering standpoint, and really we not find any issues with it. If you look, that road comes out on the Blue Ridge Parkway, and it should not have any impact on the county, in our opinion. But in VDOT, in Lynchburg District, we looked at it, and we're asking if the board desires to give us a letter of support.
Let's go ahead and do this now. Mr. Parr, is it something you want to do?
Absolutely.
All right. Anybody else have any objections to doing a letter of support as mentioned? Perfect. There you go. Got your letter of support. Is that going to come from our staff or?
It can come from your staff.
All right. Perfect.
Okay. That's what I have.
All right. Anybody have any, Mr. Barton, you have anything for VDOT? Mr. Harvey? Mr. Reed? Mr. Parr?
Did you get that section up from Ruhala added to the list of 6-year? I can't remember the name.
Yes, we're going to add that. Yeah.
That's it.
Great. I got a list, but I'll email it to you on what roads are going to get paved. All right. Hearing nothing else, thank you, sir. And don't forget my little project I'm going to send y'all on to go. Your field trip on your way out. Route 151 corridor study, Rick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, it's a pleasure to be back here with you today. Talking about probably one of the most favorite topics in Nelson County, 151 corridor.
I thought you were putting our cut on it.
That's another subject.
All right.
See if I get this right. So about 3 weeks ago, we had our stakeholder kickoff meeting with VDOT staff, consultant, county representatives, just to kind of get everything lined up as far as how we're going to move forward with the schedule. We're about 3 months behind due to data collection issues, and we wanted to also ensure that we had our ducks in a row prior to going out to the general public for comment. As part of that process, we're in development of an online survey that will associate with the public involvement aspect to hopefully be able to catch folks that are coming through the area as well, not only those that live in the area. So again, the agenda we went over was the study area and the intersections. The last time we did a study on 151 was in 2013. So it's ideal that 10 years later, which is usually about the shelf life of one of these studies, we're revisiting this again. I'm happy to say that we've had success not only through highway safety improvement program, but also smart scale and getting a number of projects vetted and fully funded and constructed along this corridor. There's still more work to be done, and that's why we're looking at this study again. We've conducted a field visit, and as far as the study itself, this is a safety and operations analysis. This is not a land use study. This is looking at safety operations through the corridor and geometric issues that might be relevant through the corridor. Again, looking at the existing conditions and then also what it would look like in the future from no building to building analysis. We're going to extend the length of the study. It's approximately 14 miles in length. We're going to run it from Afton Mountain Road intersection and then 2.5 miles south of Beach Grove. We want to catch the turns up along the mountain through there because we know there's some issues there, degradation of the main road, specifically during the winter months, and still seeing a lot of traffic come through there. And 7 intersections total. These are what we call PSI intersections. They are high accident frequency or meet a certain metric to be identified as a high accident intersection. We are aware that there are other intersections that have come up, and this is one of the things I like about the Nelson County community. A lot of these folks have my email already and have already started reaching out, which is always a good thing. So we find out about other issues. Again, the scope, evaluate the operational safety characteristics of the corridor, improve accessibility, operations, and safety. When we did the 2013 study, we looked at the multimodal approach to this, specifically in the Nelliesford area, in addition to potential for bike routes along the corridor. One of the other things that we looked at was the economic development viability of the corridor, and we've seen that improve since 2013 to the point that some of these intersections are now even more relevant for study than they were before. Some of the general characteristics of the corridor, I don't need to really go over through this. Everybody travels the corridor, they know what the issues are. You've got, rolling terrain, you've got, short shoulders, there's crossover accidents, there's road departures, there's no bike ped facilities throughout the corridor. Mind you, when these recommendations come up, they will be pricey. Bike and ped, specifically ped facilities, are pricey, very expensive, and they are high maintenance aspect. And then from the development standpoint, we're seeing clusters of development, and we're seeing development throughout the entire corridor. It's a 4-season area, so there's traffic at various different levels throughout the year. Again, I'm not going to go through the detail aspect of this. This is in your board packet. You've had an opportunity to look at it. We're going to be creating a website that has all of this information on it as well for the general public to take a look at. But we recognize there are issues throughout the entire corridor. Tenbark is an active smart scale application that you guys have submitted over the last 3 years. The fix for that is a $4 million fix. At some point in time, it's going to compete well, and you'll see some improvement out there. Hopefully, as a part of this study, we'll come up with some different alternatives. And I say that from the standpoint of alternatives are never received too well. It's a selling point to get a roundabout. Everybody has seen the roundabout that was built up to 250. You just got fully funded for the roundabout at 6 and 151. So that's going to be an active project. And then, we'll see other different projects alternatives that'll come out through. And this is a point for the discussions in the community meetings to educate the general public on what these alternatives may be. Again, we've got a breakdown of the field visit efforts throughout the corridor. We have an understanding of what the accident matrix is throughout the corridor, where those are occurring, what type they are. And we're taking out the COVID years and looking at the analysis through that in order to make sure our evaluation is correct, and we have levels of analysis that help correlate that information and make sure that it's accurate. Density maps, which is something that's newer in this study that we didn't have before, which shows the relative frequency of crashes along the corridor. So you can see higher concentrations in certain areas. And this is one of the reasons why certain intersections are looked at higher above some of the others. I mentioned the PSIs, potential for safety improvements. These are the high crash frequency intersections. And, from a relative standpoint, our district is 10 counties, 2 urban areas, and we have a lot of PSIs in the district. You can see here that Tannenbark is 80th ranked in the district as far as its frequency of accident and severity. So some of these are ranked pretty high, but we know that there's accidents along through the entire corridor. We're going to be looking at the entire corridor, but special attention to these high PSI intersection locations.
How many fatalities? I don't know if I saw that.
Off the top of my head, I don't believe, there might have been one or two.
I know there's one recently, but I don't think that would have made your.
Yeah, I know there was one at
2021.
Tannenbark when we did the first study, and I know that, I'm pretty sure there's at least one or two other ones through here. I'm not sure if they happened at these intersections or along the corridor themselves.
Got it. Okay.
Again, looking at the traffic analysis, what we did from a data collection standpoint, we wanted to make sure school was in session, and in order to calculate the bus and school traffic, we looked at the AM, PM peak hours at each one of the intersections to see where issues may be. And then, for those who love data and want to get into the analysis, we'll have all this information relative to what's happening along the corridor and at these particular intersections. Looking at traffic growth, one of the things along this corridor in 2013, we had as high as 3% traffic growth that was applied in the study. It's kind of leveled off from a linear standpoint, so we're looking at an applied growth of 1% through the corridor. There may be particular segments of the corridor that we apply a higher growth, but from a grand scale corridor, 1% is pretty relative. 3% is very, very high. And so again, we did encapsulate that in the original study, but looking at a 1% growth through the area currently. So takeaways, multiple intersections and segments needed for safety enhancement. Speed along the corridor could be a barrier for bike and ped issues. The corridor, now I will get arguments from this statement, the intersections are generally good, except for River Road specifically. The corridor, from a standpoint of its day-to-day activities, runs pretty well. We do recognize that during peak hours, on the weekends, and in the summer specifically, those characteristics change quite a bit. And it's one thing that we were able to do is working with our traffic engineering section is we have traffic data from all 4 seasons to be able to identify where some of the problems, because we may not see a problem in data collected in the fall at certain intersections, but summer will tell us a different story. So again, public transit access, these are type of recommendations that will be coming out of the study as we move forward. So next steps, again, public survey, and we will have 2 public in-person meetings. We are working on defining where those are with the county administration, and we are getting ready to get set on the MetroQuest survey. We have to have that complete prior to our advertisement. We're working through that now. Looking at a range of potential concepts relative to, again, multimodal aspect, pedestrian improvements. There'll be intersection reconfigurations, different alternatives that will be brought out. Concepts will be shown in aerial photography using GIS, and we will be providing planning cost level estimates for potential smart scale, revenue share, HSIP, various different funding levels. Again, second, public outreach towards the end of the study, we'll refine the concepts and produce the final report. So, most everybody has my contact information. Anthony Donald is our main consultant with RKK. They've been working in our district probably for about 10 years and have worked and had success in the various studies that we've had. For those who don't know me, I've been with VDOT for 22 years as a district planning manager and have conducted numerous studies throughout our district. This is one of the studies that we did originally that, like I said, for the value of the study itself, we've gotten a lot of financial funding to get projects completed to try to make this a safer corridor. So happy to answer any questions that the board may have.
Great.
First of all, in terms of data, there's a lot of data in the presentation you gave us, and thank you for the presentation, by the way. Thank you for getting this moving forward. Very appreciative of that. What additional data can we look forward to having besides what you've already given us that'll be happening and presented in the final?
So for the data collection, we do the typical, the average daily traffic, the volumes through the corridor. We look at the freight movements through the corridor, the size of the freight moving through the corridor. We look if there's any pedestrian cow pass, different things that occur. We look in the Nelly's Ford area and find some areas that pedestrians are using, that there's no relative sidewalk or safe aspect of being able to move. So we'll have that information. And then from the analysis standpoint, once we start applying that information into the intersection analysis, you'll get some feedback as to what alternatives work better based on that feedback or based on the analysis input. And then you'll have output information that shows whether it works well or it doesn't work well to be able to answer some of the questions as to why certain alternatives are being recommended versus others. Now, the other side of it is, I'm sure, when we do the public information, we're going to hear a couple different things outside of the element of what we're doing for the study. We're going to hear concerns about land use. We're going to hear concerns about other things that are going on from an economic development standpoint. I can't answer those questions. I'm hoping that the study and the outcomes of the study help the board and the county in their comprehensive plan update like it did back in 2013 to be able to possibly help with ordinance and different things like that. I know there are a lot of concerns on the corridor as far as economic development and land use. We look at that as far as growth to see how the applied growth factors take place in the corridor. But again, we're looking at the safety operations and capacity issues along the corridor. This study is not looking at providing specific land use information on what should or should not be done.
Right. Okay. Back to the data that you presented in this already. Will that be updated in the final plan, or is it going to be pretty static what you've given us already?
So what we've done with the data, it will be used through the entire study. Again, we've got relative information from last spring, summer, into the fall, and also the fall before that. So we've got a year's worth of data that we're able to use for the analysis. And through that, we'll identify, where the linear progression or degression is as far as looking at that. That's why we did the 1% growth based on how that information is being used. So we'll be able, that'll all be part of the appendix and be readily available as part of the study.
But we won't have a spring or fall or summer update to.
No, we're not going to do any future updates. Based on, we've got more data now for this study than we do on any of the other typical studies.
Okay. One other thing, when we talk about prioritizing multimodal transportation, the roundabout at River Road, my understanding is that that's not funded to have anything built into it for multimodal. Can you elaborate on that for me?
So as a part of the design perspective, we will look at what we can do from a bike pedestrian standpoint. When we did the intersection improvement up at Afton at 6 up there, we were able to tweak the design to put bike lanes through the intersection. Roundabouts are a little bit different from a bicycle standpoint. They can use the roundabout based on the low speeds through it, and they can basically just roll through. Pedestrians, we're not seeing a lot of pedestrians through there, but we understand from a corridor perspective, we want to see possible pedestrian improvements. So we will take that into consideration as part of the design.
Because for that and for whatever additional infrastructure, whenever there's infrastructure development along that corridor, it's really key that none of those become, a choke point.
Right, we want to be able to tie in. Absolutely.
I understand this, the primary, in my question, the primary responsibility is the county. But when you analyze the number of vehicles and all those things in the development of the area, we ever put a a number on, or calculate the amount of development that would be possible without, I mean, at some point, to me, we're close to that, it's very difficult to have any further development.
You'd be surprised where people develop things. As part of the daily traffic volumes that we see, as part of the seasonal traffic that we see, we will be able to make a determination, possibly from a capacity standpoint. But what we've found is there are particular chokeholds within the corridor during those times. So you may see improvements there that affect the entire corridor. You may see particular recommendations that, like specifically through Nelly's Ford and everything, that improve some of the capacity and operations through there. So I guess in answer to your question, the part of the study aspect is not to define future growth or the possibility for future growth. We're trying to correct the measures and issues that are there now in preparation for the future based upon the data that we collect. So we're hoping that you're going to be able to use this data to develop that as part of your comprehensive plan.
Would you ever make a recommendation that further development is not?
From a VDOT perspective, no, that's a county decision. And like I said, we're hoping that this data supports the board, the planning commission, and the administration, Dylan, as she goes through that development process, to be able to make a better judgment on how that's going to be applied. Now, we can work, if that's something that's, it's necessary, we've got plenty of consultants that we have access to that do ordinance development and help make those determinations. But VDOT specifically, we have to respond based upon where the growth is occurring at the time.
Any other questions? Thank you, Rick.
Thank you.
Have a good one. And make sure you drive down to that exit and then you go to each one on your way out. Moving on to compensation study, Linda, you had an introduction.
Good afternoon, gentlemen. As many know, we have been on a mission, so to speak, for the last year or thereabouts in order to gather data, present it, and analyze it in a way such as will give us the information that we need in order to determine if our pay scales are competitive for gathering new and existing employees to retain them. Last year, we contracted with Management Advisory Group in order to complete this analysis study. And we are very excited to have with us today consultant to that group, Steve Foster, who will give us an overview of the results and potentially implementation recommendations. Steve?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm very pleased to be here today so I can present to you the findings we have from our classification and compensation study. Before we get started, I do want to thank all of the employees that participated in our questionnaires. A lot of time and effort on their part, and gave us some very valuable information that we used in the course of our study. Also want to thank Linda and also your county administrator, Andy, for their help and leadership. We could have done this without them. So what I want to do first is give you a little bit of background on how the study worked. Basically, we performed a compensation classification study. This is where we come in, we take a look at all of the jobs within the county. By the way, we did separate studies for the county, also for DSS. So when I say county, most of the time I'll be referring to both. But we did a classification study where we looked at all the positions within the county. We compared them. We made sure that any jobs that were similar, that had similar duties and responsibilities, we made sure that we grouped them together for classification purposes so we can make sure that they have equal compensation. So that's where the classification part comes in. Compensation We also wanted to compare Nelson County to the other local counties around here and some of the other markets, municipalities, just to find out where you all stand when it comes to being competitive within the local market. So like I said a minute ago, our main methodology of this was to gather the most current information possible directly from the employee and their supervisor. We consider them the subject matter expert when it comes to their job. So that's where we want to make sure we're getting our information from when we're assessing these different jobs and the duties and responsibilities. We're also able to identify recruitment and retention concerns by way of the market study. We conducted interviews with top management and selected staff, and want to make sure we have their input addressed as well when it came to this report. The questionnaire I've been telling you about is called the Job Profile Questionnaire. It's basically an online product, and that's what we used to have the employees give us the information that we needed to get more familiar with their jobs, so they understood exactly what they were doing. Typically over time, jobs evolve and start to change. It was key that we had the most current information possible for the jobs themselves. There wouldn't be a PowerPoint presentation without a flow chart. This is ours, and what I want to show you here, these are the steps that we use as we go through the study itself. And it's also our way of balancing internal equity with external equity. Again, the internal equity is comparing things within the county. External is comparing Nelson County to the local market. So these are the steps that we take. We start out by talking with human resources and the department heads, go through the questionnaire process, conduct a market survey. And from there, that's where we get into the inner workings of the study itself. That's where we come up with proposed salary schedules based on what we found. We make our adjustments and our calculations based on our software. And we're able to come up with a organizational cost and come up with implementation plans for the study once we come up with our findings. This is a list of the 14, we call them targets. These are the people we compared Nelson County to. So we consider targets in one of two categories. They're either going to be a competitor, which means if somebody here in Nelson County wanted to just hop in their car and drive a few extra miles for more compensation, they can do it. We also like to include peers. So these are people that aren't necessarily as close by, but they're similar in size or in structure. So they give us a good gauge of what the market is and where Nelson County falls within that market. These are the results that we came up with based on our market survey and the information we got back. And as you can see, there is a bit of a lag. And if you look at the minimum and the midpoint ranges for Nelson County, there's about a 13% lag. So we need to get that caught up so we're competitive when it comes to hiring people and retaining people. Also for the DSS ranges, their minimum ranges are way behind, but the middle and the high ranges are not, because there's such a wide range in salary ranges right now, anywhere from 175 to 180% within the range, which is extremely high. So we're going to bring that in a little bit with our proposed pay scales. So that's going to change that just a little bit. I did want to mention though, as we're looking at each and every one of the jobs, the ones that really stuck out for us as far as ones that were further behind than others, it's the animal control officer, building inspectors, and a lot of the director positions. So those are the ones we really had to concentrate on to make sure that we're where we need to be. This here is for the.
Can I interject?
Yes, sir.
When you talk about different types of localities, but those figures are overall.
Right, we take those and we average them. That's how we come up with what we're doing.
Yeah, I know how you do it, but it doesn't really reflect a comparable or comparison. Let's say we much more us in Appomattox or us in Buckingham as opposed to us in Albemarle. Do you have figures that show what the differences are between the counties or that are like us and
Well, for all of these counties here and the municipalities that are included here, we have detailed information from each and every one of them. And what we typically do is we go through and make sure there's no outliers, like somebody that's way higher or way lower, and we average those out. So we just use that as our standard to kind of compare. And if you're talking about additional places, that's what's on that list.
well, I know that we are lower and need to increase our numbers, but I don't think the numbers would be as large
Mhm.
if you compared apples and apples. As, for instance, I don't think Albemarle would be comparable to us, would it? And should it be averaged in?
Well, this is when we coordinated this list with Human Resources, this is the list that we agreed upon. So if there's any ones that are not a good representative.
Well, you know what I'm saying, right?
Right, and that's what I mean though, because we're seeing the detailed data, we're not just averaging everything together and going straight from there, looking at each detail. We get that for the benchmarks for each one of these targets. And if we see something that's going to inflate things or something that's going to drag it down, we take those outliers out. So for example, maybe somebody like Albemarle, maybe some of the entry-level positions are more comparative than some of the executive type positions. If that were the case, we would be able to use a portion of what we got back from Albemarle versus using everything that they sent us. So that's just how we try to make adjustments to the market survey. We do have a lot of information behind the scenes that's not shown up on the slides here that we do use.
Mr. Barton, I'll just add that Albemarle is included because they are a competing county with us for employees and being in close proximity.
I just thought that point should be made. I mean,
Right. But if, for example, if you were losing people to Albemarle County, and we have retainability issues in certain jobs, we want to know why. So we would compare their information, so why are people leaving here and going there? And we can see what the disparity is and try to resolve that. So.
One quick question in the
Sure.
next slide.
Mhm.
22.29% minimum. What's DSS in this slide? What does that stand for in this?
Department of Social Services.
That's what I thought.
Yes.
I just wanted to make sure I was
I
thinking
should
the
have
same.
been a little more.
Because right below, you've got, I didn't know if it was something salary study or,
No.
it is department, okay.
Right,
that's
in fact,
what I
the
was-
report you're looking at, we took all the results from both and combined them, everything for the county, everything for DSS is combined into this one report. There's separate information for both, but rather than write separate reports with law duplication for both, we just combine them into the one report. So, like I was saying about the DSS is, the way their pay ranges are set up right now, there's about a 175 to 185% width in the pay range, which is very wide. So that's allowing the middle and the upper pay ranges to look like they're competitive. But we wanted to make sure that we're looking, again, at apples to apples. So when we come up with our proposed pay plan, we're going to make a pay structure that has a 50% range versus the one that's triple that. And that's going to make things a lot easier to measure. This is the county portion of the study. There were a total of 67 job titles. And again, we're going with open ranges with a minimum, midpoint, and a maximum. There's 34 grades within the pay range, and we adjusted all of the widths to 50%. So that just means that whatever the minimum is, the maximum is going to be 50% of that. And then the midpoint, we right smack in the middle of that. For DSS, we're talking 10 unique job titles, and it's the same criteria with the open ranges. This time there's going to be 29 grade levels. And again, bringing the widths down significantly under the 50% range. So we can capture accurate, middle, and high range, as well as minimum range. Just want to give you a little bit of a breakdown on how these costs go. Basically, what we were looking for in our recommendations is we're looking at a 3-step process. We're looking at an across-the-board increase of 5%. And for the county, there's a total of 128 positions, 67 different titles. Once we get that 5% across the board applied, that's when we address with the new pay ranges. We have to make sure that everybody is at least up to the new minimums. So that's called our adjustment to minimum. That's going to affect 59 employees in the county. And the cost for that is going to be roughly $190,000. Last but not least, in our
Now-
three-step plan,
Now, that number does not take into account fringe benefits, correct?
it does not.
Andy, that
This is
number-
this is compensation, strictly compensation.
And that percentage normally is about 20-ish%.
It's about 21%.
Got it.
And the last adjustment is going to be, we call it employee equity. And what we're doing here, since we've made these new pay ranges and most likely raised the entry level, we have to make sure that people that have been in these jobs for a while are not right up against the new people that are coming in. So the equity adjustment takes into account promotion dates and how long people have been in a particular job, and it rewards them for that and pushes them further into the pay scale, so we don't have, we call it compression. If you have people that just started bumping up against people who've already been there for a while, we're trying to decompress that. So that's the point of the equity adjustment. So the total annualized adjustment for the county would be $625,800, and that's roughly 11.22% of the current payroll. We did the same thing for DSS, Department of Social Services, and for them, they have a total of 22 positions and 10 job titles. So again, we're going with the 5% across the board increase, followed by the adjustment to minimum, and then the equity adjustment for people that have been in their job for a while. That affects 7 of the 22 positions. So we're looking at an overall total of 68,300 with a change in total payroll of 7.5%. We also provided in this report, and we worked with Human Resources on this, we also like to include recommendations on compensation policies. Things are going to run across over time. Things like reclassification of a job, promotion criteria or issues, lateral transfers, demotions, temporary assignments where somebody just steps in for the time being. We want to make sure they're being compensated for stepping up and taking on that extra responsibility. Hiring practices, and we also like to address employees, it says here, that are maxed out. Those are people that are at the top of their pay scale. They've been with the county a long time. They progress through the pay range and they're up to the top of their pay scale. So these are the types of policies that we've run across over the years, and we just like to make sure that Human Resources is up to date on those so that you all are consistent with what happens nationally and nationally. So as a result of this classification and compensation study, we feel like that we've come up with a fair and equitable plan for internal relationships amongst all jobs. I also think that we've made you all more competitive with your starting salaries so that you can compete with some of the other markets around here that may be a little ahead of you when it comes to entry-level pay. And then just one last thing to repeat is the total cost for the county in the Department of Social Services. So I tried to keep that fairly brief, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that y'all have.
So if you could go back to this, where you showed the scenarios. Yes. So I think it's one thing, just obviously whenever we talk about any pay raises, fringe benefits always go along with that. So if you look at, let's just say that adjustment minimum, it shows 189. The county would probably more likely realize $240,000 to $250,000 in new costs. Am I incorrect in saying that, Candy? Generally,
Yeah.
that 230, yep. So we just need to just make sure when you think of these numbers that that's also a piece.
Right. Yeah, the reason why we didn't really mention that is because when we were doing our comparisons with these other counties and municipalities, we were strictly looking at their compensation as well.
Yep.
So we see the 13 to 14% disparity. That's coming strictly from the compensation standpoint.
Yep.
Where would this put us? You know, you showed the.
Right. This is our initial analysis, and what it shows, it puts you guys, you're not leading the pack, but you're definitely not the bottom anymore. You're in the middle of the pack competing with the local market. So that's why we like to do these presentations, because we're showing you what we came up with as our best analysis. And then from this point, if there's, issues that need to be looked at, either at the department head level or something like that, they can make additional adjustments. But this is just to get you in the ballpark and show you what you're looking at.
All through the state, people are, having problems in getting staff
Oh, yeah.
and pay. So they're also, these other places would be raising their pay.
Right.
How does that figure into your figures?
Well, when we ran our market survey a few months ago, we actually took into account additional inflation and things like that, so we call it an aging process. So that's all been put into the numbers you're seeing here. So even though the market survey was done several months ago, we're still able to update it based on the current climate, based on inflation costs and things like that.
Obviously, some of this dance goes with the comp board and whatnot. Has the state decided, or is we getting any other indication that it's going to be 7% pay raise for DSS and the other entities?
I haven't gotten any updates on that, but both the House and the Senate within the General Assembly, I think, are recommending that.
And what does 5% equal for us just today as it is?
I'm not sure that we've calculated that yet. We're still working on those numbers for the
Okay.
budget.
All right.
It might be
How's
fairly
this-
close to that 271, 775, without benefits.
Got it.
Right, that's 5% across the board.
So if we did, in the event, the state does the 5%, obviously historically, the county always follows suit, we would be doing the 271,000 more than likely. And then to get us to the minimum would be an additional 189.
Yes, sir.
So-
What that is, that's taking the new pay
That-
ranges.
Yeah, and so that puts you at, wow, 400 and some K for fringe benefits, larger than that,
About 460.
460. So,
I mean, I think it's important to note to the board and to the public that the last time we did a compensation study was 2016, and that was implemented in 2017.
Right.
So, and then in between, we haven't ever really adjusted our scales by any factor, so we're not keeping up with the market at all in that time period. So that's why I think some of these numbers are as high as they are. So, you know,
Right,
I
and
would-
this is about the right time for a new study, because we recommend usually every 3 to 5 years, so 2016, 7 years ago. So that's why it will be a little bit higher based on that timeframe.
And internally, I think staff has discussed just the need to look at some factor to apply to our scales on an annual basis so that we're sort of keeping up at least a little bit as we go forward in between our compensation study periods. And that way we won't see such a big, blip when we do these studies. But we'll need to figure out how all that's going to work, the machinations of that, but.
That definitely helps with the sticker shock if you're doing that.
I've got a question. But just to let you know, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission has had a really brief discussion last month about this. And it turned out a lot of the counties and Charlottesville City close by are either in the middle of or getting ready to complete compensation
We
studies.
found that out when we were doing our market surveys. We called people and asked them for their information, and they say we're in the middle of one of these ourselves, so.
Right.
I was just wondering if you were doing the studies for any of those.
We have a good footprint here in Virginia. We're doing Stanton right now. One of my colleagues is also doing Roanoke City Schools and Roanoke County Schools, Chesapeake Schools. And we just did Frederick County, Virginia, a year ago, this past summer. So we do have a pretty good footprint here in the state, but as far as right around Nelson County, closest one's probably Stanton
Okay.
and Roanoke.
Because TJPDC just not formally, but I think we're going to be, kind of comparing what we come up with because we're all,
Oh, yeah,
it's budget season for everybody.
absolutely.
So we're all doing.
Makes sense.
any other questions? Staff, do you have any?
No, I just want to really thank Linda Staten and her staff and all of our employees. As Mr. Foster pointed out in the beginning, it's taken a lot of work between staff and our employees to get them the data that they needed to complete the study. So just want to thank everyone for that.
Excellent. Well, thank you, sir, for the track
point is that we have fallen considerably behind,
Correct.
and
This is the way to get back on track. If you can't do it all at once, at least we're trying to get you guys moving in the right direction.
All right,
Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate your time.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Davenport, we have Ben. I see you, sir.
Should have a few hard copies for you, because there are some smaller numbers. in here.
Oh, boy, you got those binders again.
Smaller numbers?
They're smaller.
I like small numbers. No.
Well, they're small in size, not in magnitude.
Oh, hi, Christine. She didn't want to say hi to us. Christine didn't want to say hi. So weird. Do we want to take a quick 5-minute break? Let folks leave?
Your boss.
I think we're ready.
You're good?
Yeah,
All right.
maybe in a half hour.
Half hour. I think after the
Feel it
coming. All right. We could settle the conversations a little bit so we can proceed. All right, Ben.
All right, good afternoon. As you mentioned, my name is Ben Wilson. I work with Davenport and Company. We serve as financial advisor to the county. This is a continuation of a conversation that started over a year ago.
North side.
Dylan, can you tell the folks outside to take the conversations down the hall?
We'll shut the door.
Yeah, so this is a continuation of a conversation we started over a year ago with the county about your debt capacity and affordability. So this is really talking about large capital projects that you all may be considering taking on over the next couple of years and how that sort of fits into your overall budget. So let's get started. So like I said, we started this conversation last year, December 21 and March of 2022, sort of leading up to the development of the fiscal year 23 budget. We are here revisiting it because we are going towards the fiscal year 24 budget this spring. We just wanted to revisit the assumptions and the timing just to make sure that we were still on track with everything. So sort of in the bottom section, just sort of goes through the analysis that we've done and some changes that we've made to it since last year. So what this looks at is potentially funding up to $75 million worth of projects. We really broke that into two segments. There's a $57 million portion of it, and then an incremental $18 million on top of that to get to the $75 million. Now, I think the important thing here is that these dollar amounts aren't assigned to a specific project, so they're a little bit fungible in what exactly you all will be funding with these dollars. But just going down to that bottom section, like I mentioned, we're looking at funding these projects in the next 3 to 5 years. We have increased the interest rates compared to the analysis we shared with you all last year. I'm sure many of you are aware that since the analysis was presented last year, we've pretty much only seen rates go up. So we have added a little bit of cushion to it. And on the other side of that, we have extended the maturity of some of the debt we're looking at in here. It's still well within the useful lives of the assets that you all are looking to potentially fund. So don't think there's any concern with that. We just needed to do that to take into account the fact that we're going to have higher interest rates if we were to do this right now. So moving on, this page, I'm not going to go through every detail here, but the point here is the left side is the projects we were looking at last year. Again, they're fairly generic at this point. And those dollar amounts can sort of move in between them with relative ease and still get to a very similar endpoint that we're going to look at here. In the first section there, we're looking at the assumptions we had in our prior analysis. On the right side, just what we've updated. I mean, the big things that we are looking at here is the timing of the borrowing. So in the second section there, the capital facilities project and DSS building, those have been pushed out from fiscal year 2023 to 2024, just because they aren't quite ready to be funded right now. So it's looking like the borrowing for that's not going to happen until at least later in this calendar year, which will be next fiscal year. We've also increased the term in the second to last column. We've gone from 20 to 25 years to 25 to 30 years for the most part. And then our interest rates, like I mentioned, we were doing sort of a 4 to 5% range. Now we're just sort of doing 5% with a little bit of cushion for those additional projects, just in case they would have to be done on a taxable basis. Moving on to the next page, looking at that first incremental $57 million, key assumptions here that we wanted to point out. You all have already implemented a portion of this plan, a little piece of it, in setting your budget in fiscal year 2023 for debt service at $3,933,000. So that is a little bit higher than what you were looking at before, and that was included in the plan previously, and you all implemented that in your 23 budget. You also set aside $2.3 million in the debt service reserve, and I'll get into that in a moment, what those dollars are going to be used for. But essentially, you're using fund balance to prevent the need to come up with a lot of new revenues over the next 5 to 7 years. So just to fund these $57 million worth of projects, you're looking at recurring debt service of about $3.9 million. And you'll see that's right about the same as what your budget is for debt service. So that's good. However, you do have debt on the books right now that you're going to have to pay off over the course of the next 8 to 10 years. So the point is here that you can fund the $57 million because you are budgeting that $3,933,000. You set aside $2.3 million, and over the next couple years, your actual payments that you're going to have to make on the debt service that you have right now is a little bit lower than that $3.9 million. So you're able to set aside some more funds that will be used to sort of pay debt service in the years where it's a lot higher. And we'll see on the next page, it's a little bit easier to get that picture. So what we're showing here is in the graph, we've got in brown there, the brown bars, your existing debt service. So that's debt that's already been issued. We know exactly what those payments are going to be. And we've graphed what those payments look like out through 2031. So you can see that it steps down a bit. And the fact that that steps down gives you all the opportunity to fund more projects if you keep your budget at a similar level. That red line there is your budget for debt service. So as you can see, going from 2022 to 2023, it's gone up a little bit, and we've held it constant going forward. We're just assuming that you all will keep it at that level. And in that brown box, in fiscal years 23, 24, 25, and 26, you can see that the payments that you all are making are actually lower than your budget. And the reason that we are planning this way is in that yellow box, you can see once this $57 million comes online, you're going to have a couple years where your existing debt service, the brown, overlaps with the new debt service, the light green. And because you've got that overlap, there's going to be really 2 big years where the debt service is going to be well above that $3.9 million that you're budgeting. However, you all have set aside the $2.3 million, and if you set aside what's in that brown box in the next couple of years, you'll have more than enough to cover those peaks in debt service that you see starting in fiscal year 2027. And then as your existing debt service goes away, the brown trails off into 2031, that level returns back to your budgeted level of $3.9 million. All this is saying is you're able to fund $57 million worth of projects based on your current budget, the $2.3 million that you've set aside already, and the assumption that you all will set aside a little bit more over the next couple of years to cover those peaks. Okay? Was there any questions on that? Okay. So this page is really just the details behind that graph. I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail here. Column B is your budget. So that was the red line that you were looking at on the last page. We would look at, do you need any additional revenues? In this case, you don't. So that's column C. Column D, you've got your total revenues available. E is your existing debt service, so the green there is corresponds with the brown bars on the graph on the last page. And then column F is the light green on the last page, so that's the projected new debt service for the 57. Yes.
I may be going backwards a little bit because my brain is still turning.
You're fine.
See if I have this right. You're projecting that when our current debts are paid off, we will recognize revenue from that based by, and that would then be folded back into our debt service as opposed to having it be used for some other county needs that we might have.
That's exactly right.
Okay. So if that assumption were not there, did you do any analysis to find out if we did not fold that back in, what we'd be looking at?
So if you didn't fold that back in, you would be looking at recurring debt service of $3.9 million that you would have to make up for. So it just so happens that this 57 million, the debt service that you're gonna have to pay is very similar to what you're already budgeting. And that's sort of how we arrived at that $57 million number. So 3.9 million would be the number you would need to, if you were to get rid of that budget and go and put it somewhere else in the budget, you would have to come up with 3.9 million to fund this 57 million. Any other questions? I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you and talking a little bit fast, but. All right, so back on page 6, we've got our existing debt service in column E, our projected debt service in column F, so that's associated with the $57 million. And then column G just adds E and F together. And then you've got a surplus or a shortfall in column H. And as you can see, that surplus is positive for the first 4 years. And that's what I was talking about, where you can bank some of those dollars, set them aside, so that once you get out to 2027 and you start seeing those shortfalls, you can cover those shortfalls with the funds that you set aside. And then column I is just where we are setting aside those funds. It starts at the 2.3 million you've already set aside. It banks some, and then it uses those dollars up when you have those negatives. Okay. So now we're going to look at an incremental $18 million worth of projects. So this assumes that all the same things that we talked about in the last scenario where you funded the 57 million, and now we're saying, all right, what would it take to fund another 18 million on top of that? And the answer to that question is about $1.4 million per year. And what we're looking at here is actually a borrowing that occurs in 2026, so a couple years out from now. And because of that, your debt service, principal and interest would start most likely the year following. And that is when you would need that $1.4 million of additional revenues to cover this $18 million additional project costs. Now, like I said, this still assumes all the same things that we were talking about in the last case. Your budget of $3.9 million, $3,933,000, stays at that level going forward. And it assumes that you keep that 2.3 for these projects, which you've already set aside for. So here we've got our graph again. The brown is the same, it's your existing debt service. The light green is the same, it's the $57 million that was funded. The light blue that we've added in here is that incremental 18 million. So that just gets added right there on top. And as you can see, there's still a little bit of a peak there in fiscal years 27, 28, and then a little bit in 29 through 31. So you all need to be able to cover that over and above the 3.9 you're already budgeting and the 1.4 that would be needed in addition. So that's going to be made up by the $2.3 million that you've already set aside and whatever dollars you can set aside over the next couple of years because your budget is higher than your debt service right now. And as you can see, that gold line, it's a little bit hard to see on the screen, but it might be easier to see on your paper. The gold line that comes up in 2027, that's where that $1.4 million comes into play. And as you can see, once you get past your existing debt service, again, the debt service ends up down at that level of that gold line. So that's your budget plus the 1.4 would be able to cover that in the future. Again, that assumes that you budget the 3.9 million for debt service going forward. Okay. So this goes into the details again. I'm not going to go through this one. You all know the setup. This is just if you'd like some perspective on what the actual numbers look like instead of just a graph. But this is all just saying the same thing that the last page was. All right, so one thing that's very important that we look at on a regular basis for our clients is your debt ratios. So when you go to borrow money, the lender, if you borrow in the public markets, you go out and sell bonds, you would have to go to the credit rating agencies in New York and show them, all right, here's all our finances, here's what we look like, here's our plan, and they would give you a rating. They pay a lot of attention to these ratios. Even if you stay within the state and go to the Virginia Resources Authority, they're going to pay attention to this kind of stuff as well. So we want to keep an eye on it for you all, because $75 million is not an insignificant number for Nelson County. So the first one we're looking at here is your debt capacity. It's your debt versus your assessed value. So this takes into account real estate, personal property, all assessed values that you have, and it compares the amount of debt you have outstanding to your assessed value. It's not a perfect measure, but it does give a good general order of magnitude whether someone is overburdening themselves with debt when they shouldn't be. And it's based on your tax base, because that's how you all make a decent portion of your revenues. As you can see on the right side, we've done a comparison here. The gold 0.5 Nelson in 2023, that's before you do any of these projects. So that's relatively low. You'll see it's below these budget and population peers. So those are just some peers throughout Virginia that have a similar budget size and a similar population. And then the regional peers, that's the counties sort of surrounding Nelson. So you look very good right now with that. If you were to go forward with the $75 million, we would be looking at something closer to 2.8%. Now that is well above where you are right now, but it's still a very reasonable range. No rating agency would look at that and say, no, they have way too much debt. What we would even recommend is that you all put a policy in place that's in the 3.5% to 4% range. So 2.8% is higher than where you are right now, but you all are at a very low spot right now. So this still looks good even after the 75 million gets put in place. Now this other side of it is debt service versus expenditures. So before we were looking at the amount of debt outstanding, now we're looking at the debt service you're paying in a given year compared to your budget, essentially. So what percent of your budget are you using to pay off debt? Right now, you're at about 6.6%. If we were to implement this, the height of this would be 10.9%, but it would come back down, and that's shown here. That very tall year, 2027, that's the 10% we're looking at. So it would come back down right after that. You'd have a short period where that's higher than the peers here. But again, what we would recommend is a policy with this ratio in the 10 to 12% range, which is really even a strong policy. I mean, many places in Virginia have a policy of 15%, and some even have 20. So 10.9% is still very strong. A 10 to 12% policy would be viewed very favorably by creditors. So that's something that we can revisit over the coming months if policies are something you'd be interested in putting in place. A lot of the times policies that are put in place don't actually change any of the stuff you're doing on a daily basis. It's just a way of showing lenders and the state and everyone that you all are staying on top of these things. So this just leads into sort of our wrap-up slide here. We can make adjustments to this analysis if you think that there are specific projects you want to be looking at, or if any of these assumptions that we've made in here are not what you envision for the future. We can make adjustments to that with Candy and Linda and Amanda. And then, like I mentioned, we could consider looking at some financial policies. We could put together some materials for you to look at and help draft those if you would be interested in doing that. And then we'll just continue to work with you all to keep track of this and make sure that as you go forward and as you do more projects, we're still keeping this in mind and thinking about everything strategically rather than just going and borrowing money as you need it. So, anyone have any questions? I feel like I've been talking a lot.
Yeah. I think some of this we did see, I guess, the DCR info relating to where we were. We've seen that before. I guess that kind of is relatively the same. Does anybody have any questions for Ben? How's your buddy doing?
Well,
Yeah,
he's good.
that's good.
He just wasn't able to make it today. He
Tell
sent
him
his regrets.
I forgive him.
He'll appreciate that.
Gotcha. Any other
So your analysis, last 3 years has been very consistent where we're at.
Yeah, and I mean, we did make a little bit, some adjustments here to the structure of the debt, because interest rates have gone up. I think the thing is though, the interest rates we're assuming here are still well above the current market. If you all were to go out and borrow money right now, you wouldn't be getting 5%. However, we don't know when these borrowings are gonna happen. So I think at the end of the day, the point I'm trying to make is that it'll probably look even better than this. But for conservatism and because of the uncertainty in the market, we've been a little bit high on those interest rates, so.
When we determine what we're going to do, we can piecemeal this thing together.
Oh, yeah.
We don't have to.
No, so this is something we do with a lot of our clients where they have a big picture, these are the things we want to do. But I mean, the reality is you're not going to sit down and borrow for 7 different projects at one time because you're not going to know how much they are. You're not going to be able to bid all of them at one time. It's just, it doesn't work in a practical sense. So this is something we would revisit from time to time. Say you all decide to move forward with the DSS project later this year, we would help you all with that. We would take this into account when we help you with that borrowing. And then once that borrowing is in place, we can revisit this and say, all right, what does that mean for the rest of the projects you're looking at? So it's sort of it's a little bit of a moving target, but it's flexible. And it's important to stay on top of it, which you all have been doing, so.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Safe travels.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know we let some folks in here, like Keith and Albemarle's representation.
Be kind.
Be kind. Can't do that. Oh, are you leaving now yet? I'd like to invite you guys up. We're going to talk about housing. It's nice for someone else to talk about it other than me on this board. So we have Mr. Ned Galloway, who's Albemarle chairman or board. What are you?
Former chair.
Former chair.
Not the current.
And also head of our regional housing partnership, and Mr. Keith Smith, who's a big part of that story. So I'm excited to see what you have to say to me.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Rutherford, honorable members of the board, and Mr. Secretary, good to meet you. Pleasure to be here. As Chair Rutherford mentioned, I'm a current member of the Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. I'm the current chair of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, and it's my pleasure to be here in front of you today as the current chair of the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership. I'm joined today by my colleague, Mr. Keith Smith, who I'll talk a little bit more about, but is the current vice chair of the Central Virginia Housing Partnership. He is also a 12-year member of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission representing Fluvanna County. Joining us is our housing planner, Mr. Ian Baxter, staffed at the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, so he does all the work behind the scenes for us. And as you'll meet in a bit, but is with us today, there's Christine Jacobs. She's the executive director of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. Our intent today is to introduce ourselves and to tell you a little bit about what we do at the Regional Housing Partnership. So the structure will be, I'll talk a little bit about how it came to be, why it came to be, who's a member of it, And then I'll hand things off to Mr. Smith, who's going to give you some overview, some information, some data on Nelson County specifically. Ian will be discussing some deliverables. We'll be doing some invitation to some future events. And then we hope that you'll be ready to ask some questions and have a brief discussion about housing in Nelson and how we can be helpful to you. So I'll jump right in. So the first piece is, how was the partnership created? And you're going to get to hear from the man who is really the energizing force behind the creation of this partnership. So as I said, Mr. Smith has been with the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission for 12 years. And a few years ago, it started to be that housing, which is in his professional career as a realtor, housing affordability is an issue. And there were different segments of the population all talking past one another and not really getting down and having one conversation regionally about housing affordability. And that, he thought, was part of the issue. So why not bring everybody together and start discussing, okay, this is a regional issue that we're all dealing with. We have crossover and things that we can learn from one another. And why don't we start getting in the same room to have those common discussions so we can learn from one another about how to go back into our jurisdictions and help solve some issues. So as you can see on the screen, when he started talking to people to pull this together and ultimately had the Planning District Commission sign off on it as something that's under the umbrella of the TJPDC, we wanted to make sure that there were keys, rightfully so. So we need to have representation on the body from these four particular pillars, if you will. The public sector, or the folks that we serve, right? The folks looking for the housing and the affordable housing. Folks in the nonprofits that are working with the people looking for affordable housing, who are providing services and whatnot. The private sector, the people building the units, and those who are, through different means of trying to provide either affordable units or put something into their developments, perhaps through density bonuses or whatnot, how do they attack and help with the housing affordability issue? And then, the public sector is the electeds and us and the service official, who we serve are those looking for the housing piece. So that just basically started having the conversation. The TJPDC formalized the partnership together. We came out to each of the jurisdictions represented in the TJPDC and asked for representation, specifically asking for an elected official, at least one, to serve, and an alternate to serve if that elected was unable, and then a second person that'd be able to participate in different ways through your jurisdiction, whether they're service providers or in your nonprofits, et cetera. So we all came together. We have quarterly meetings with the entire partnership, and then the nuts and bolts of the work is done through an executive committee that meets monthly to focus the work and do the work and kind of drive the work of the Regional Housing Partnership. So as you can see right now, the current membership is here. I'm not going to read through that. And you can also see our mission and the vision. On the previous slide, the why was there, and it started to speak to that in that crosstalk of, we all, as regions and as jurisdictions and counties and or cities, we know we are dealing with housing crisis and housing affordability issues within our boundaries. What are we doing about it? The Regional Housing Partnership is not here to tell you what to do. We're not a policy setting body or a policy directing body. We're here to serve as resource to Nelson County or Fluvanna County or Louisa County to say, what issues are you finding and what can we do as a body in our collaborative efforts to help you solve your housing policy objectives in Nelson County. So that's what we stand here for. So right now we're going through a strategic planning update. I hope I'm not stealing anything from Ian, but two things came out of that, and we're finding that we're formed a data committee, which Mr. Smith is the chair of, and we also have the communications committee, and our chair of is Mark, you're right. I was forgot there. I had a brain moment there where I was like, Margaret is our chair of our communications committee. So we happen to have both folks that are chairing those committees here. The data committee is about what information can we help gather around, not just for those participating, but to provide to the jurisdictions to help you with your affordable housing issues. And then the communications body is to say, how do we push that information out, but also receive your requests back in to stand as that resource for you. So gentlemen, that is what how we came to be, primarily why, and you can see here who's particularly right now involved. And our strategic plan, the third element of it, is looking to, do we have the right people around the table? Do we have the right churn with the people around the table? So our strategic plan, we just effectively hired our consultant that's going to help us with membership. If you haven't heard of the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership, why is that? Are there other people in the spaces under those 4 pillars that we need to have at the table to help us deal with this issue? And before I sit down, I'm going to say thank you officially to this board. Not only have you contributed to the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission in the past, but you, for the first time, also agreed and budgeted money to us for direct contribution to the Regional Housing Partnership to continue our efforts. That was based on a per capita basis. I believe here in Nelson, that amount was $2,875. And we're very appreciative of that because that allows us to move to the next level, to be able to gain and gather those resources and focus them better to be at your service. And we also Ian will be talking about an event that's coming up in March, and we also appreciate the fact that you folks have made a donation to that event as well. And I'll leave that for Ian. And now I'm going to hand off to Mr. Smith to start going over some Nelson County data.
Keep on looking around for my phone. Mr. Smith. By the way, I'm going to talk about some current numbers because you guys have excellent internet. I was able to search that.
Really
As I was sitting in the thing, just to let you know, in case you didn't know, you guys got really good internet. Jesse might remind you from
It is. It's pretty great.
sometimes about that.
You've always had good internet, Mr. Harvey.
So I'm the guy that's going to show up and kind of not give the good news, right? Ned did all the flowery talk. I'm going to kind of tell you guys about what's before us at the moment. So the next series of slides, what we're going to be looking at, and they're in your package. These are single-family detached. This is Nelson County only. So just to define that, because you have Wintergreen, right? I break out the numbers between Wintergreen and Nelson County because if you put them together, it could skew things a little bit. And we'll talk a little bit later on about the numbers on it. One of the great things about Nelson County, you're the only one of the jurisdictions around here that has condos to sell. So that's a good positive. So if you take a look at it, 2022 numbers, your volume of sales has went down over 2021 about 21%. So what you're looking at over here is a total volume of sales of single-family detached. So as you can see, you can be tracking that. It's kind of all over the place. The next slide is what the sales prices are. These are numbers that are actually closed. So in 2022, your median sales price was $401. So I just did some quick search from the beginning of the year with your internet. Anybody want to take a guess on what the median sales price of all the single-family detached homes sold in Nelson County from January 1 to this very moment?
And this excludes Wintergreen.
It excludes Wintergreen.
435.
400. So we're still tracking on 22 sales
Still on the
numbers.
same one.
So that figure excludes Wintergreen.
It excludes Wintergreen. We're going to talk about Wintergreen here in a minute. So that excludes Wintergreen because when you mix them together, it really skews the numbers. So if you're looking, the average sales price right now for a single-family detached home in Nelson County, without outside of Wintergreen, is selling for 400 grand. They're closing for 400 grand. And oh, by the way, you sit here right now, you've got 22 available for sale. The median list price is $722,000. There are 6 homes for sale right now in Nelson County that are under $289,000. The next list price jumps up to $495. So there's only 6 homes for sale right now as we stand here at this very moment between 0 and 289. I told you I was the guy with the good news.
Mr. Smith, may I interject a question, Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
Do these numbers take into account the land associated with the home?
These are total sales. This is total sales, total close. So if you buy a home, if it's 1 acre or 100 acres, so it breaks it down. I can break it down further, but at the moment, this is just a big picture.
Thank you.
Okay. Great question, because in rural counties, you have a little bit more land, and if you take a look at it, as you start going into the larger sales prices, you usually have a little bit more land. So this is Wintergreen. Nelson County Wintergreen sales. Wintergreen sales, single-family detached homes, though not large, percentage-ly has dropped quite a bit year over year.
Right.
So again, you can take a little bit what's going back and forth on that. The price, on the other hand, has jumped. So sales of volume has went down, sales price has gone up. Now, we talked earlier, Wintergreen has a unique feature to it. It has condos, right? Very few in our car footprint. Charlesville Area Association of Realtors footprint has condos. Wintergreen's an exception to that. So the number's a little bit higher, but our sales have dropped a little bit year over year. But take a look at the prices. We were in the bottom right, 2017, you can buy a condo in Wintergreen for 119 and sell it for 253 right now. So why am I doing this? Why are we having this conversation? Why is the Regional Housing Partnership here? It's here to help housing affordability. And as Ned has mentioned, I'm in charge of the data committee, so we're going to be posting a lot of this stuff on our website. But one of the sources that we can be for you as elected bodies is to help you understand a little bit about what the market is out that way. I'm going to give, should I call you Chairman Rutherford, or can I call you Jesse?
Whatever you want.
Okay, so Jesse pointed out on a conversation we had once before, which really rocked my world. It was last Friday, that the Nelson County teachers, and correct me if I'm wrong, the Nelson County teachers can't afford to live in Nelson County. Is that a fair statement?
Yep. Today moving forward.
Yeah, so, and if somebody wants, so I also chair a thing called the Community Land Trust, Piedmont Community Land Trust. So to put some perspective to it, in order to buy today at between 60 and 80% area median income, the sales price cannot go over $215,000. We don't have too many $215,000 houses for sale in Nelson County.
And I think it's something to venture to say that those numbers that are in that range are not purchasable anyway.
Your excellent internet did not give me enough time to go ahead and dig into that, but next time on your excellent internet, I will go ahead and dig into it. But if you look at some pictures, some of the lower prices are strong. So I'm the guy that's giving the numbers. Ian's going to talk a little bit, come up, and we'd love to answer questions. And yes, I'm from North Georgia, in case you want to know that.
North Georgia, yeah.
North Georgia.
All right, well, thanks, folks. I'm just going to briefly elaborate on what Ned was talking about, but before I get into some of the strategic plan deliverables, I just want to highlight and thank publicly Nelson County for contributing $1,000 to our Coming Back Home Housing Summit. Very much appreciate that donation, and we're really looking forward to having, I know a few of you have signed up. Jesse's actually a panelist at that event. That's going to be March 24th at the Charlottesville Omni. Be happy to provide more information. Tickets are $45, include parking, breakfast, lunch, and coffee. So, and a bunch of great sessions. So it's a good deal. But that is sort of built into one of the strategies that we're looking to implement is basically having these regional housing events, these networking events, and basically serving as this venue for regional collaboration around affordable housing. So some of the information that Keith has shared, that's sort of one component of what we're hoping to have. We're hoping to have a housing data dashboard that's similar to what Keith presented, but also might include information and statistics about rental housing and homelessness, a grant library for developers and nonprofit housing providers to find funding that would be able to fund affordable housing, and then also an affordable housing toolkit that'll have case studies and similar information about similar jurisdictions as the planning district to kind of guide and support housing policy. So that is all I have to say about that, and feel free to answer questions. Oh yeah, and we're also, there's a tool developed by an organization called HAND in Northern Virginia that is a slider that basically has a set amount of these fake individuals, but has a picture of them and then their occupation. And so as you drag the slider from left to right, left being the least amount that you pay for housing and the right being the most, shows how many of them become housing insecure, so paying more than 30% of their income on housing. And once you get about 3/4 over, not even to the maximum, the only people that can really afford housing, or at least are not considered housing insecure by HUD's definition, are doctors and lawyers and folks that are making at least 3 figures. So we're trying to create something like that for our planning district to kind of illustrate how difficult it is for, if we're talking about teachers, firefighters, police officers, to live in the places that they work. So I thought that as a good tool.
Hey, try to email that to us in the planning.
Yeah.
I'd love to circulate that to the planning commission.
This problem is daunting. I mean, I think probably is a stronger word. You know, having to do with income and having to do with availability, building costs, and everything. I mean, I respect you for trying to address. What place are you at in beginning to address this problem? I mean, you know, those figures will reflect the difficulty of what you are facing, we're all facing. Where are you beginning? Where do you think there is possibility for action?
Before I answer that question, I want to ask a question of the chairman to make sure I don't go off too much script here. Might be going off script a little bit. So that's how it works, right there. Bringing everybody under the tent and having a discussion. So the public sector is you guys. But nonprofits are the land trust, and I'll give you an example of a project that the land trust did here in a minute, using this 4 pillars to actually achieve some, what I call magic. The private sector, the builders, the developers. I'm also a recovering developer, by the way. I'd like to think I'm in my 10th step, and I'm really probably in my first step. Then the people who we serve, who we're going to serve at the table. So let me give you an example. Albemarle County Board of Supervisors gave the land trust $625,000. That was the public sector. They also helped us with a little bit of red tape turning into green tape, so I was able to get some stuff approved through the process. Brought in a nonprofit, which is the land trust. I went and made a deal with Stanley Martin Homes, and what we ended up doing was building 23 in Albemarle County affordable houses for $215,000, putting teachers, cops, firemen, folks making less than 85%, less than 80%. They were 65% AMI, who was the people who we served. In 1 year, with $625,000, we put 23 people in permanent affordable houses. And it took that to make it happen. 1 column isn't going to make it happen. 2 columns ain't going to make it happen. 3 columns, might get that roof to stand a little bit, but as a builder, you know it's not going to last all that long. It takes all those 4 columns to make it work. So it can be done, but everybody needs to be under the same tent. Did I preach a little bit? Did I get on my soapbox a little bit too much on that? It can happen. You just got to want to make it happen. It can happen.
I think
Thank you, by the way, for the question.
I think some of the discussion, and as I've gotten to learn a lot in the last four-ish years about what processes and procedures and methods exist in preserving affordable housing. And of course, I've been in that in my own personal life and what that looks like in creating housing inventory. You know, some of the most solid methods you'll see happen are communities such as Montreal Village in Nelson, right? Where there was an acquisition of land where the housing stock was built with a specific purpose for a specific group to afford. You know, land trust is a huge piece, you know, but there's, even then, we're talking on a scale that needs to be quadrupled. You know, 23 is a great number to do. The housing deficit that we got is in the thousands. And, you know, that's why we as a region have to look at this issue together, because the reality is Albemarle's inability to take care of their housing needs becomes our inability to house our Nelsonians. And so that's why when we got our comprehensive plan statistic recently with I guess that was census data and the Employment Commission that said there's 1,600 people who live and work in Nelson County every day. Yet 4,800 leave Nelson County every day to work. But the most intriguing number after that is the fact that 2,000 people drive into Nelson County to work Nelson County jobs. And so, you know, that tells you that you got a whole other different kind of scenario going on with the inventory complicatedness that is not easy. And the reality is, we talk about the teachers, you know, they drive in from all over the region, not north normally, but from Amherst, Appomattox, to work Nelson County jobs. I mean, you look at deputies, we have countless number of deputies who now are living in Amherst, working Nelson County jobs. So is it a wage thing? I'm not going to say no, but I will say more than likely you'll see that number, that same group of 2,000, even if there was a certain wage correction, would find themselves preferring to have a better lifestyle in a different county because with their more money than trying to infiltrate the housing market of Nelson County. Again, the median's 400K. That's a serious number. And the demographics to hit that number, I mean, you're making real money. And we're the people that are working those 2,000 people who work in those jobs, there's a bigger pay gap than you could ever imagine trying to figure out to fill that void.
I mean, yeah, preaching in choir. I mean, all I'm saying, I mean, all this is real.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that.
Oh, yeah.
I just want to add to Chair Rutherford's point, is, as an elected, it gets easy, right? We say teachers, firefighters, and police department. That comes off our lips fast about them living there. But what opened my eyes a few months back is we got a presentation at the Regional Housing Partnership that talks about folks even making $20 and $22 an hour are having trouble affording rental units.
Yeah.
So if somebody earning $20 an hour, I'm in just started my 6th year on our Albemarle County Board of Supervisors. A year ago, if you would have said, what kind of hourly wage are we talking about here? What kind of folks are struggling to get housing? I probably would have said something like $15, $16 an hour. So when I'm hearing that $20, $22 an hour is having a hard time getting into units, it just brings it home a little differently. Because now we're not just talking about our teachers and our fire folks and police officers. We're talking about the people working on our cars and changing our oil, right? I'm in the car business. We're talking about the service providers that who are coming into to help us out. And Albemarle says the same thing. Our teachers and our fire folks and our police folks can't afford to live in Albemarle.
Drive from Nelson.
And that's happening. So what can, and it's not about, Albemarle shares a lot of the same issues you share because we're a very rural county. We also happen to be a very urban county in areas. And that's where the partnership comes about. I've learned a lot from your county and what you're dealing with and the folks that have come up and shared information with us on how to attack the rural issues that we have in our particular neck of the woods. And that's what this partnership's about. It's about not dictating or setting your policy. You get to decide what your path forward is and how you're going to do things in Nelson. But what can we do to help provide those tools for you, the information that's at our disposal?
Yeah. We all agree it's a huge issue. Why, as a society, have we been unable to address this? Because it's nationwide. It's a problem. We don't seem to think of it as a really critical issue.
And I think I'll let Keith take a stab at this as well, but we had this conversation. So we've made presentations to Greene County, the city of Charlottesville, Albemarle, and you're our 4th jurisdiction. And this conversation started to happen a little bit in Charlottesville, at least how I'm going to mention it. But there's a conversation, do you build your way out of this problem or do you subsidize your way out of this problem? So when you talk about, well, what do you do about it? Well, just building the units is not going to happen. Like if you just came in to do the development, if you've got buy rights, it's just going to drive those numbers up, Keith, if I'm right. So we Albemarle, I just said this a week ago in my meeting. I looked at my other board members and said, if we don't think we're going to have to pay, invest in, and subsidize with these units coming online, we're not going to be able to provide affordable housing to our residents and the folks that are living in our county. And that becomes budget questions and that becomes a lot of other things. And that's when I say, like, what your policies are, the public body, can they solve the problem? Nope. It's going to take partnership with those 3 other places. But it is going to start taking things like, what's our housing policy? What's the goals of it? And what are we going to do to start attacking some subsidizing of be able to provide the units that are coming online to get the folks in there? Keith, you want to add anything?
I don't think I could have said it any better myself. Yes, it is a national problem. I'm part of a couple of national cohorts working on this very issue. But and I don't want to conflict conversations here because I'm going to put my chairman hat on as the land trust. It's just there's no silver bullet to this problem. There's a silver buckshot, right? So there's a bunch of little pellets in that buckshot that's going to help solve this problem. But without all those 4 folks under the tent or under that roof, it's not gonna happen. It takes all of a sudden, and if we can do 23 homes in Albemarle County, or if there's a project here in Nelson County, then something can happen.
You know, I agree with everything you said. You do little things and you try to deal with the problem. But we need to think about what's the cause of the problem. And that needs to be verbalized.
Good.
You know, and that's I asked you, why are we facing this where people who work full-time can't afford to buy a home?
I mean, in my opinion, and I've had this conversation with your chair because of your great internet and your ability for people to live in their homes and work from them homes. A place like Nelson County became a premium during the pandemic because people were not moving to a place where they did not have good internet or good fiber. Am I right?
Yeah.
So what happens? You get a lot of people all of a sudden, and that's, when the basic economics turns into, you got a lot of demand and short supply, that's going to drive everything up. We live in a region for various reasons that, I'm always cautious as an elected official to pat myself and other elected officials on the back. But you guys are sound board that, when you look at your economics and your budgeting, you just had your presentation on thinking out to what your capital improvement investments are. You guys are doing that in a sound way. So when people look for places to live, our Central Virginia region are where people want to come to. They see stable government, right? They see people making good decisions. They see high quality of life and the education, the amenities that are around. And yes, they can work from home and they have an easy airport that they can get to in 45 minutes. So if they can come to the Nelson County and have the beautiful home and some land at the rates that are there, and that starts to put that demand on your area, and they can get up to Charlottesville and get out on an airplane with probably in less than an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes, or jump on a train and pay $40 and be in DC. People are now desiring to live here, and that is coming in, and that's what's driving up these values in a way. And if we, the governing bodies, now again, this is me, in my opinion, don't do something to help those who were here before, or are on a different income
That's what I'm
scale.
talking about. I'm talking about the people, even the people who are here, our family here, who can, get some land to build a house, are still having trouble affording to be able to build a.
So what we do in Albemarle, we do it at the end of our executive committee meeting and our partnership meeting, just like some of our other TJPDC meetings, we do a roundtable and we go around talking about, well, what's going on in your neck of the woods? And so that gives me a chance to say, like in Albemarle, a few weeks ago, we had we're trying to define developer incentives right now to get to the housing targets we want for affordability. So for example, we're increasing our bonus density from 15% units to 20%. And the rentals are coming down from 80% AMI to 60%. Well, who's going to pay for that? The developers? No, it doesn't pencil on their sheet. So we, Albemarle, have to put money into a budget, into a housing fund that's going to pay to help them pencil the sheet and provide those units that we're looking for. So that's one particular way that we're doing it. Each county then, in your own housing policy, come up with what those targets are. And it allows you to control what you want. And, that's your job. To figure out how your comp plan works and all this works inside of that. But that's just one example of how we in Albemarle are doing that. And it's been a process. We voted on this policy 2 years ago, and this is the first segment of that policy. We still don't have it in place, so we're still allowing things to grandfather in under the old policy. So, but how do I know about developer incentives? Because I've had developers sitting in this room go, here's what would be helpful to us to be able to bring down the costs, even in the face of inflation and rising supply chain issues and goods and the things that they use to build the homes, right? Tax incentives, maybe we get expedited review, maybe you make different standards on parking, maybe you waive the tap fees for your water hookups, things like that that can eliminate costs for them, so that they can bring down what they're charging either for the unit or charging in rent. And those are the types of things that you learn those ideas as you hear others talk about. So in our rural areas, like when I've heard some of your folks and what they're doing here in Nelson to do programs here, I take that back to my board and go, here's what Nelson County's doing. And their rural area looks a lot like ours. I probably talk too much, but I appreciate the dialogue, sir.
Any other questions?
I just I want to thank Ned and Keith and Ian and Christine, for bringing the A-team today, because it's great to hear this from you. I've heard it on the perimeter, I've sat in on some of the partnership meetings. You probably found the debt service discussion pretty interesting in the context of all this, and you alluded to it a little bit. I'll be a little more direct. Most people look at that in terms of, county capital improvements. But clearly there are other things that those can go to, services something. So that's a different approach to capital improvement that I think covers the first pillar and makes it possible to bring the other ones in. So hopeful that's something we can do, and I would love to have this be an example a couple years down the line for you to be able to your board, and I'm glad that we can benefit from some of the stuff you've been doing too.
Thank you. I just want to give a shout out to the gentleman behind me and his board, because those 23 units, to your point, that $650,000 translated into $8 million worth of profit. Right? Just to think about the ratio and all that. But the important thing is, and Jesse will tell you this, 25% of new construction costs goes to red tape. So Albemarle County was able to help streamline the red tape process. To go through the way we did it was rather complicated. I brushed off some 1980s developer tricks to go ahead and do it, but we were able to do that, bring that all together without the money, was the first part. But the second part was helping streamline the process. We had one person to work with, and one person walked the projects through. We were able to get them done, approved, built, and put people in it in a matter of, I think it was about 14 months, 15 months.
That's really good.
So that, to your point, that's what the public sector can help with. Thank you, Mayor.
Great.
I'll just conclude on a hopeful note. I really do, Mr. Barton, appreciate your comments and continuing to ask that question, because that's one we all are continuing to do. And the beauty is each time, whether it's 1 unit or 23 units or even more, each time they come online, the fact that we are all now talking amongst one another and sharing those success stories, ultimately is going to allow Mr. Rutherford to come back and say, here's what's going on over in Louisa, and maybe we should take a look at this. So it's not trying to invent your own solution from scratch. We're all in it together. We're all kind of figuring it out as we go. And when we do find some success, we're going to share that with one another. Because the one thing I've learned about affordable housing, and I know that Nelson County and Albemarle County, politically speaking, we're pretty much in line, but it's not so much so with everybody else in the TJPDC. But this issue, there's no politics involved here. This isn't a political party issue.
Right.
Now, how you spend money and how you raise money and things like that may be. But at the end of the day, this issue and how it's going to be solved isn't really politics. It's just about getting down to work and figuring out what we need to do to help the people that reside in our jurisdictions. And gentlemen, appreciate your partnership as we move forward, and look forward to that collaboration as we all work to solve the issue.
And make sure you tell these guys to come to the conference.
Conference is March 24th. Mr. Rutherford's already in because he's a member of the partnership.
And they're working hard.
But please do come. There'll be sessions. As we said, Jesse's giving one of the presentations, which I think we're all going to find enlightening because he's given us a little insight into it. But I think it'd be a great day for you all to come up and meet the others on the partnership, start talking with some of the other folks under our housing system, and see what you can bring back to this board.
One of the reasons we're so passionate about this is what we're talking about is one of the 3 things that are required for a trip around the sun: food, clothing, and shelter. And by the way, Havana's getting close on the internet. We're almost getting there. I'd be remiss not to talk about that about my
We'll call it co-op real quick. All right. Thank you guys so much. Let's take a 5-minute break. Oh.